Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Another special edition is also part of the Great Canadian Aftermarket Trade Show virtual event. With me today is Murray Voth, regular contributor for us here at Chat Media on the Indie Garage side as well. Welcome to another fine event, Murray.
Oh, hi, Andrew. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, now the aftermarket has been doing great. The uh, the service providers out there have really been busy.
Mhm.
And so we thought we would take a really good look and have a special session uh, that we have titled, Are We Having Fun Yet? Why Good Business Feels So Hard. Now, anybody who is out there in the service provider working on their bays looks around and you think, geez, you've got business booked out weeks in advance, uh, dollars are up, repair order averages are up. Volume of cars are up, although that's not obviously the thing we always want to focus on. And we should be feeling like this guy, right, Murray? Look at this.
Yes, we
Look how
should
happy
be.
he is. Man, a
I
happy
know. He just,
man, very professional in front of a bay with all of the bays, all of the lifts are busy. But a lot of guys are feeling like this fellow here,
oh,
hands on his head, pulling their hair,
exactly.
trying to figure out why all this great business they have is just uh, stressing them out.
Yeah.
Um, so here's the open question, Murray. What's going on out there?
Well, Andrew, I know we've got to work within a little time frame here, but let's talk about three key areas, and I want everybody listening to be able to take away something to make their stress level lower and gain more profitability. So, a couple of things, and as you've talked about in many of your other podcasts, the shortage of chips for new cars then put pressure on the used car market and all of that. People had a hard time finding a car, and so they were keeping their car. But on top of that, a lot of Canadians woke up to good fiscal management. They decided, you know what, low interest rates, replacing my car every 5 years, yeah, I was being lazy, it was easy. I never did that before, right? I always kept a car for a long time. I always invested in it back in the 90s and early 2000s. I invested in my cars and I kept them 10 or 12 years, but now it was easy to get them. And this isn't changing just so much from the interest rate increase, Andrew. It is the pandemic got people to wake up to better fiscal management. Not everybody, but a lot of people, right? This was already happening before the interest rate, what we're seeing now, and at least with my clients. So now interest rates coming in, and now it's more expensive to buy a car. So now there's just pressure on availability of cars. Joking in a group of mine or a class of mine the other day, I said, when my kids were starting to drive, a beater was $500. I don't even remember what a beater was when I started to drive, but I said, "What's a beater going for today?" And they all laughed at me and said, "You're lucky for 2 or 3 thousand, right?" So think about that part, right? The old beater that we used to drive when we were out of high school, right? Anyway, so that's one factor, Andrew, is availability of cars is putting pressure. People are putting money into their cars, hence the reason why the aftermarket's doing great. Another reason is there is shops closing, believe it or not, in this world of plenty. Now, if I talk to different groups of people in different segments, I get different messages. I talk to my Saskatoon market and they say, oh, there's all kinds of young people open up shops, right? Or I talk to somebody else in a major urban center like Toronto, and there's lots of new Canadians opening up shops, right? Serving, they've come across and moved here and they have brought some skills and they're opening up a business, right? So there's these businesses opening up. But on the flip side, in middle-sized urban centers, people our age, we won't say what that age is, who are now tired. They've been running a one-person show, a two-person show, and they're tired, they're exhausted, they're tired of dealing with the public, they're not keeping up with technology. And it's everywhere from selling to walking away from the business and selling off the assets, and or if they own the property, selling the property, and if they're lucky, that's their retirement, right? Just two of them, just in the Kitchener-Waterloo market, just a couple of months ago, right? And one shop, and I don't know these people, I just hear about them from my clients. One shop didn't even have information technology for their technicians, as in Mitchell or All Data.
Yeah.
right? The two main brands that people buy, right? They didn't even have that. And so why does that matter? Well, that matters because a whole bunch of clients are now let loose into the marketplace who are now searching out for shops to serve them. Now, some of these shops closed down because they were not charging properly. They didn't understand profitability. They were giving everything away. They were giving discounts just to keep busy. And so now service advisors at good shops are overwhelmed with people looking for help. However, a lot of explanation about why prices are more, showing the value, showing the difference, right? So there's that challenge. There's that challenge there,
Sure,
right?
sure. You have a whole pool of customers that had made, when the decision was theirs, they were making a
Yeah,
different decision about a different kind of a shop, right? And now
yeah,
they're
exactly.
to probably a more professional shop with more capabilities, but there's a price
Yeah,
to that. And so these are, we've talked for years about how, not everybody out there is your customer. So you
exactly.
have a bunch of people that maybe in previous times would never be your customer, and now you
Mhm.
have to decide, are they now going to be my customer? I mean, you don't want to leave them
Yeah,
in the lurch, but are they now going to be your customer? And that takes some time. And as you mentioned, you have to have the conversations and
yeah,
explain.
yeah. And they are winning. They're having wins. They are gaining people once they understand the difference and why and all that kind of stuff. There are definitely some wins. There's just a lot more work for the advisors, right? I'm going to circle back to that topic as well shortly here because I want to talk on a third one, and that of course is the perennial employment HR, people. Not only are we looking for good advisors and looking for good technicians and drawing from an ever shrinking pool. However, the good side of that is anybody who works with me that's of any size gets a stare down from me if they don't have an apprentice. So everybody that works with me at least has one. And I've got clients, Andrew, that have 3 and 4 apprentices. They're going to build their own. Because when we started this conversation 4 years ago, if we would have all had an apprentice 4 years ago, we would have had a licensed tech today, right? So we're moving forward. And some of them are having licensed techs today because of that whole process. So there's good news. But the other side is, and I don't want to be unkind, but the pandemic has exposed, and my wife uses the term the forest fire, and that's kind of inappropriate today with the record fires that we've been having in this country. But she says it's exposed, it's burnt away the underbrush, and it's now exposed the weaknesses in our companies and in ourselves, including myself. Her, she's not pointing fingers. It's like we're waking up to things in ourselves that we've had to deal with and think about and work at, right? And so what's happening is some owners are assuming that the old way of managing, it's over now, we can go back to the old way of managing is going to work, and that's not flying. And then there's a segment of employees who, for whatever reason, whether personal stresses, their own stresses, personalities, their backgrounds, family situation, whatever the situation is, are just not finding the energy within themselves to commit to a full-time job. So we've got staff shortages. We have people taking sick days beyond the normal amount. Now, is that inappropriate? Well, we don't want them to come in sick because we've learned our lesson with letting people come in sick. So now people, between management and employees, they're being very strict about coming in when you're sick. So now we don't have this overlap. We have shortage of people. All right. So let's talk about some solutions in this whole thing that I find.
Because I think I think as you've been running through this list, I'm sure that shop owners out there have been nodding quite a bit, going, "Yeah, I have one of those, and I should have done that."
Yeah,
And boy, he's
yeah,
right about the apprentices becoming
yeah,
technicians now, and all that. But boy, here we are now, right? And
yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
thanks for explaining my problems, Murray. You know.
Yeah, exactly. So I was last weekend I was speaking at the AGM of a small tire banner program in British Columbia. They call the Grip Tire Group. Really interesting bunch of folks, fantastic shops and clients working with them. Cool thing about a couple of them, without using names because they haven't had a heads up, but a couple of them and I go back to 1992, 93 when we first took coaching and training for Bob O'Connor. That's when we met. So I go that far back with a couple of these shop owners, right? So we had a really good time on the weekend. But here's the interesting thing. One owner said, I have no problem attracting technicians. He's a really high-end, high-tech shop. super deep into Sprinter vans, diesel, and super deep into hybrid and electric, right? So again, technicians are like lining up because I want to work at the best shop in BC, right? Kind of. The other fellow said, I have no trouble getting advisors. Technicians is a bit more of a challenge. Well, I've watched his advisors and his managers because these are big enough shops that they actually have managers, right? And I see the culture of that shop of how they bring young people on and how they encourage and develop people. Young fella yesterday, he started 3 years ago on the front counter. Very little automotive experience. He was a second-year apprentice, but never on the front counter. But he's got really good with people. He now runs his own location in 3 years, right, as a manager. So they have a development program for people. So the idea here is the clients that are focusing on training plans are focusing on giving people a career and looking at onboarding processes, engaging their employees new in person, are the people that are winning, right? Great advertising, great interview process, fantastic onboarding, and constant touching base with people and engaging people on how progresses are going, including their own feeling about working at that company, their own health issues, their own mental health, whatever, doing check-ins, and these folks are winning. Now, are they tolerating poor behavior? Are they tolerating bad performance on the one bad apple that might all of a sudden show up or develop? Of course, they don't tolerate that. They have proper ways of dealing with that situation. Now, that may sound idealistic, and I'm saying it in a very short period of time, but this is something that you have to start your journey somewhere. And as you start the journey, you build momentum in the HR department.
Yeah, it's a really good
Right.
point because many, many years ago, back when I was racing in the Honda Michelin series, late 80s, early 90s, I had occasion to talk to a technician at a dealer. Um, Good guy, good race tech, but he worked during the days in the bays,
Yeah.
and we were talking about training and the training that he was required to take and his kind of attitude, which maybe not his proudest moment, I'll say that, and often was, I take this training just so I can keep doing what I'm doing. It just was such a demotivator. He had to work so hard just to stay where he was at. And
Yeah.
these days, with the focus of so many people being on personal growth, what's my path? What's my career path? I love being a tech now. What about tomorrow? Do I get to at least be a
Yes.
senior tech, or like what happens? Or do I get to always be just this guy that's still always the rookie, until
Right.
next guy comes in 5 years from now, or what? And they want to know
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
people coming in. It's not. I know we talk about apprentices like they're kids often. I say kids, teenagers. They're not. They're
No.
usually been through a couple of different options in their careers, and now they're
Yes.
in late 20s, and they're coming in and they have expectations.
Yes.
And they should have. The reason why they've
Exactly.
chosen the automotive aftermarket and an automotive technician skilled trade, is because they believe that can take them somewhere.
Yes. Exactly. Right. On a little side note of that, I am really being very firm with everybody I talk to and work with about starting wages for apprentices. There's still this perception that an apprentice starts at half the rate of the highest journeyman in the shop, or some kind of old style way of doing that. Well, number one, we should be raising the journeyman wages already anyways, but even if somebody is at 40 an hour, which is pretty decent in Eastern Canada, we got people hitting the 50s in BC and Alberta. Half of that for a first year is only $20 an hour. Well, here's the point that I found ran across: is the living wage for Canada is $24.50.
Right. Right.
So you can get a job at McDonald's for $20. You and I talked about this one of our last episodes, right? So I believe we should be starting first year apprentices at $24 an hour. And I've got owners looking at me. I never made 24 till I was licensed. And I'm like, folks, paradigm shift here, folks. Do you want to have employees in 6 months or a year or not? Well, they're so young. I like development program, onboarding, right? How many times do we expect apprentices to learn by osmosis?
Right.
Right? Well, you just here's a broom and you watch, and someday when you grow up, you're going to work on a car. No. After their first week of orientation, how to use bay doors, how to use the hoists, how to test drive a car, they're working on stuff. They're learning how to do tire repairs. They're learning how to do basic inspections. They're learning how to do maintenance services. they're helping technicians with major jobs, holding things and bringing things and doing stuff like that right off the bat, so that within 2 years, we pretty much have somebody that can produce all day in certain areas of a vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And I think and then when they're engaged that way, then they're going to want to stay with you and they're going to want to grow and stuff like that. But, a bigger shop like the ones I'm referencing, sure, there's a career path, there's roles for shop foreman. Within that group, there's going to be a role for a technical trainer evolve among their banner, right? And things like that are going to happen, which I observe in other banners as well. But even with my smallest client, 2 bays in London, Ontario, in order for him to be profitable, achieve his retirement and his financial goals, he's going to have to specialize in his 2 bays. In the summertime, obviously, they have their California bays, quote unquote. But in the winter in London, Ontario, you ain't working outside, right? Well, guess what? Right? They're starting to focus on Asian premium vehicles and Euro vehicles. And the technicians are interested in learning these newer cars and learning the more luxury end of things. It's a luxury client who will pay a luxury rate for luxury service. They're bringing on a valet who's going to deal with car washing and things like that. So it's going to be like a small elite shop, like a small elite restaurant, right? We've been to those places where there's 4 seats or 6 seats or 8 seats, and we leave with a bill for $500 after we're done with one of the most fantastic meals we've ever had, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm proud of him. He's chosen that. Now those technicians, maybe 5, 6, 10 years from now, maybe will want something different, but maybe within my network of stuff, we'll be able to get them set up with something, and he can bring on another apprentice and grow that person. I got to tell you a good news story, Andrew, before I give another solution.
Yep.
A good client of mine in Calgary successfully sold his shop several months ago. For whatever reason, I've never heard of this before. I do not know the details. The new owner did not want to keep the employees. Okay. So there must have been some other need for the business or their own team or whatever, right? Kind of unheard of in this day. I've heard of that. It happens, but pretty rare. Anyway, so now we have got 2 technicians, an apprentice, and a service advisor who are awesome, and we got to find them. Well, guess what? They were employed with my other clients by the afternoon.
Yeah.
Like we kept them in-house.
That's
right?
awesome. That's awesome. And it occurs to me, just backing up, then I'll let you get on with the other part of it, that, the kind of half journeyman wages sort of deal. Again, remember, there's a very good chance that the apprentices coming in are 28, 29 years old.
Yeah.
Kids, they may have family, or at least aspirations for family.
Yeah.
And so they're not necessarily to be paid as if they were living with their parents or something. I mean,
exactly.
You can't count on it. And that's certainly not a way to do it. And this, I guess what I'm saying is that this needs to be considered. Maybe this is a segue in how you price the services you offer to generate the profit you need to be able to make sure that you can pay not just your top guys, top techs, and your other people, but also to make sure there's room enough to compensate, train, and develop the new smart, intelligent folks coming in.
Exactly. Totally. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. So here's the other piece: is everybody of any decent service center in Canada right now is booked out 2 or 3 weeks already. In like the quiet of July is not hitting, right? I know a couple of heavy duty places booked out till end of July and getting into August already. And we have October coming up. Not that I want to think about it, but we have October coming up, and who knows if we're going to have that dip in August and September that we sometimes have in our industry. So I'm explaining to my clients, guys, I don't think the dip is coming. I think this is it for now for a period of time. And so we have to rethink some things. And and again, like I said, I am being taught some things. Those other guys I mentioned, my peers, they're figured out some pretty cool things that they're teaching me, and we're passing this on to other people. So here's an assumption that I feel that we have made in this industry. And I'm going to talk about an assumption, and even one that I made that I was corrected by some other coaches down in the States in a meeting. All right. So here's the assumption: for the last 50, 60 years, the assumption is that when a customer phones up for an appointment today, tomorrow, the next day, that their car will be done that day. Right? And we've been able to do that back when you and I stocked 6 oil filters, 3 starters, and 8 hoses, and we could service everything, right? But that piece that we had to get it done today has been this assumption by ourselves and by technicians, right? I also had the assumption that our clients had that assumption. The US guys are telling me that there is some fairly recent research that the client never ever assumed that the car was going to get done that day. Now, oil change being one, maybe tire changeover being another, but as far as repairs, that was all in our own head.
Right.
Right. So we're moving forward with a different paradigm. We're going to run 2 schedules now. All right. We're going to run our technician schedule, which are going to be run like operating rooms and doctors, which has nothing to do with the triage at the front office of what we're going to do first, right? So here's the thing. We're going to say, when somebody phones up, we're going to say, we can look at your vehicle tomorrow, the next day, like relatively soon, but all we can do is do a test drive, a basic visual inspection, or a set of preliminary tests to identify what your timeline is going to be. We have no idea what the concern is. We don't know what the parts availability is. And currently our operating rooms are full. We'll get you in the queue once we know, we wouldn't use the word triage, but once we've triaged where your vehicle is at.
Yeah.
Now, here's the interesting thing.
A bit of an idea what the vehicle might need, right?
Right. So what's happening is shops are scheduling people in for just that basic, right? And I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on a couple of things with the technicians. And then after they've identified that, depending on how much more they have to do, sometimes they've got the answer within a half an hour. Sometimes they have to make a diagnostic plan for an electrical issue, might be longer. So now the advisors are estimating the parts, they're sourcing the parts, they're calling clients up, they're getting authorization, all the parts are showing up. And here's a new policy that's being put in place in a couple of shops. They're not starting the car till every single part is on the shelf and it's been inspected. The idea that I'm going to assign this car to a technician and I'm waiting for the thermostat gasket from a parts company, and it's like the most common engine on the planet, we're not going to assume that, because what happens if that parts car breaks down or gets in an accident on the way? Now my technician is bogged down for one gasket and I've lost that tech and I've lost that hoist, however long that fixes. They're not even going to begin it till they can do surgery the right way, right? See the paradigm shift that's happening? Now, you might think to yourself, so this is going to help, it's going to mitigate the booked out 3 or 4 weeks, because now what you can say to people is, yes, I can help you, but only to this amount, right? Because what we're saying to people now is I can't even help you at all for 3 weeks. That's making them angry, right? That's making them frustrated.
And you're also, it occurs to me that in doing that, I mean, I just recently had, some brake service done at a really
I saw that.
close to that, because I had a great experience. So I'm going to tell everybody great experience.
Yeah.
Because they they took the vehicle when they said they were going to take it. They finished it when they said, and they charged me what they said. This doesn't sound that difficult. And yet some of these, you're right, I didn't take it right away. I didn't have to wait 3 weeks, but it was about a week and a half. But I also went in saying, like, I know I need the brakes. Because but having said that, it does mean that, if I'm taking it in for an inspection, and I'm developing a work plan for it, I've now, to some extent, I mean, there's no contract here, but to some extent, I've tied that customer to me. If I say I can't help you for 3 weeks, I leave it open for that customer to go shopping.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You just used the word contract, and a shout out to one of my competitors, Chris Cotton, down the States. He uses that term when he trains his shops and his service advisors. That's the first contract. And once we've got the first contract obligation met, we then go into the next contract for the actual repair. And that's the language he uses when he trains the people. Now, whether they use that with their clients or not, I'm not sure about that. But I think it's a fantastic concept. But here's a couple of cool things that have happened, Andrew. For whatever reason, I don't know all the reasons, but it's happening. The pandemic opened people's eyes to not being so tied to their car. People seem to be willing to leave their car now more than they did because they have another car or their spouse can get a ride. They've realized that they can actually be more flexible than they used to think they could be,
Sure, sure. And I think
right?
it's not beyond credibility to suggest that in a lot of cases their employers now, having had employees working remotely or hybrid for several years now, will understand if a day a certain employee is going to be working at home because
Yeah,
their vehicle is
right.
in the shop.
Exactly, right. So, but here's the other cool
Now,
part.
obviously,
Yeah,
obviously not everybody can do that, and so
yeah,
shout out props to everybody who can and cannot, but
yeah,
certainly more than we would have anticipated before, where we felt that real presenteeism and the need to be in the office every day,
yeah,
Monday to Friday, um, and that's just it's not the case anymore, which kind of speaks to what you had said.
yeah. So here's the other piece that these shops have been discovering, kind of by accident. They're discovering that that's all a lot of these people want is they want it off of their driveway.
Right, right. They need a
They
plan. They want a plan.
they just they and it doesn't, let's just keep this gender neutral. One spouse says to the other spouse, have you dealt with the car yet? It's got a check engine light on, it's dripping on the driveway, it's got a squeak or whatever. Now I haven't had time to get away, the shops are too busy, they're telling me 3 weeks. Well, the shop that says, yes, I can get you in, the most I could do tomorrow is do a test drive with you, or the most I can do is inspect for the leak. They're like, okay, no problem. You've seen the leak? Yep. We have to make a plan. Sure. Can I leave it with you? Yeah. Bye. And then when their spouse is nagging at them, did you take the card? Yep, I took the card. Well, why isn't it done yet? I don't know. Dumb Murray at his shop over there can't get it done on time. So now they pass the buck off to the shop owner, and they're both smiling. The shop owner's rubbing his hands, and the spouse is rubbing their hands because the problem is now in progress of being dealt with. Right?
Yeah,
They want it off their to-do list.
that's it. That's it. And
Right?
yeah, I mean, we can go on and on with lots of examples, but the idea that if your check engine light is on, you're stressed about it if you care about your vehicle, uh,
Yeah.
and you can't get in because it's still running, but you don't really know, and you don't really know, and you don't want to be without your vehicle. You don't know for how long, but you bring it in,
Yeah.
you get a little bit of diagnostic test on it. The the technician or the shop says to you, you know what, it's a crank angle sensor. It takes us a few days to get there. You're fine. You're fine. I
Yeah.
know some cases
Yeah.
there's been a recall on those things.
Exactly.
Fine to drive it. If it starts flashing yellow, then stop. But you should be
Yeah.
fine. No worries. And
Exactly.
we'll get you in. We should have the part in 5 or 6 days, and come in, and we'll get it taken care of.
Exactly.
Now you have
Yeah.
that peace of mind. You feel like you have a
Yeah.
plan. Um, and
Exactly.
uh,
Yeah.
and that customer, from the shop standpoint, that customer is now going to come back to you because you've already tied them in for the repair. You've already committed.
Exactly.
They're happy
Yeah.
for it, and
Yeah.
everybody wins, right? So
Yeah. So two quick things before we conclude here. One is one negative that has to be mitigated is parking becomes an issue now because now our lots are fuller and people are figuring out how to do that. But secondly, here's the beauty, right? A technician starting today on Friday is working on a car that was dropped off Monday or Tuesday. And so now when they start today, they have 2 cars, maybe 3 cars, and all the parts are here. All the authorizations are done. Everything is in place. There is no interrupting that technician at that point. So they can rock and roll through these 3 cars, and they can really make a lot of profitability and good time for that business. Which leaves us one other challenge is where do I fit in those initial inspections and diags and stuff like that when I've already got my technicians pre-booked in the operating room now for a whole week? Well, what we do is we start only doing those in the mornings, and we only give one per technician,
right, right,
right?
yeah. So
Starting to make a plan.
you keep it organized. You fit the other ones in
Yeah,
between. They're sort of half-hour quick checks. You get a plan together for the customer. So there's a couple of good points. Build your efficiency by planning ahead.
hmm
Tie your customers in by doing those early initial inspections so you get a work plan in place, and really make sure that you're paying, you're charging enough to pay your people. Okay,
yes,
that's enough.
100%.
That's all we got. So I know three problems, 3 solutions, easy done, just like that. And we the happy guy here. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you Murray for the great advice and insights. Everybody out there, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and everything will work out all right.